Ministers, dear delegates to the 22nd IISS Shangri-La Dialogue, we will now begin the sixth and concluding plenary session. And since Friday, we have, of course, been engaged in defense diplomacy, and we will now turn to another issue on our overarching theme, and we will now talk about enhancing security cooperation for a stable Asia-Pacific. And of course, what we want to cover here is that regional security cooperation being an important pillar for stability across the Asia-Pacific, we want to think about how that might evolve in a world that is perhaps more fractured than it used to be, where we have rising great power tensions and a shifting geopolitical and defense landscape. And that shift has, of course, or is, of course, driving increased investments in security partnerships, in engagement in regional organizations, and in defense capabilities as well. And we will hopefully explore how security cooperation can mitigate regional challenges. And I'm delighted that we have three distinguished ministers here with us for this concluding panel to tackle these themes. Dr. Billy Joseph, the Minister of Defense of Papua New Guinea, Dr. Paul Jonsson, the Minister for Defense of Sweden, and last but certainly not least, the Coordinating Minister for Public Services and the Minister for Defense of Singapore, Chan Chun Sing. So we will have their interventions. We will then again collect a number of questions, and hopefully we will be able to fit in 2 or 3 rounds of questions. So as before, get ready, insert your delegate badge into your microphone unit, press the button, get in the queue, as the first person has just done, and then we will have ample opportunity for dialogue. Dr. Billy Joseph, if I can ask you to take the podium and deliver your remarks. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Honorable Chair, panel members, Minister Chan and Pal, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. I would like to express my sincere gratitude to the organizers, IISS, and the government of Singapore for providing this platform for the security dialogue for the last 22 years. Although this is my first time to attend this dialogue, my country, Papua New Guinea, has always supported the successive iterations of the Shangri-La dialogue. I found the plenary sessions yesterday very enriching, informative, and engaging. Today, I am honored to continue our discussion on a topic that is not only crucial for my country, but also for other countries of the world. That is enhancing security cooperation for a stable Asia-Pacific. There is no doubt that we are facing an evolving security landscape, from the traditional security challenges to emerging security threats, and from tensions in the Korean Peninsula to the South China Seas and to Myanmar are examples of increasing security concerns in the region. These tensions are placing increased pressure on the international rule-based order, which then poses security concerns to all of us in the region, including the smaller Pacific countries. In such environment, we all say a responsibility to ensure that these tensions do not spiral into conflict. That is why we need to enhance our security cooperation and strengthen our engagement mechanisms to address these challenges. Papua New Guinea is focused on achieving our shared vision for a peaceful, prosperous, and a unified region so that all of its people may live free from any encumbrance. For Papua New Guinea and most of the small Pacific island countries in our region, Our security challenges extend to illegal fishing, transnational crime, and climate-induced natural disasters. We now have climate refugees in our country. For example, the Carteret Islanders in the autonomous region of Bougainville. Yesterday, in session 4, we discussed about the emerging security challenges in cyber, undersea, and space defense, which were highlighted. We were also informed that cybersecurity is borderless and is not limited to any particular region or territory, and is more into the civilian domain. Regional security platforms are viable collective options to respond to these security challenges, both within our region and also outside of our region. Papua New Guinea sees open dialogue, regular engagement, and regional cooperation as the key to addressing these security challenges and for safeguarding regional peace. As a small developing nation, we try not to compromise our social and economic aspirations over security. This is reflected in our foreign policy, direction of being friends to all and enemies to none. This principle has guided our engagements for decades, and it continues to shape how we see security cooperation in our region. Papua New Guinea is also committed to our long tradition of engaging with our Pacific partners to collectively meet and respond to regional security needs, as articulated in the Bukit Tower Declaration, the Board Declaration on Regional Security, and the 2050 Strategy for the Blue Pacific Continent. At this forum today, I acknowledge Australia, New Zealand, Chile, France, and Fiji of the presence at this esteemed security dialogue. Together, we make up the South Pacific Defense Ministers Meeting architecture. Regional multilateral forums such as the Pacific Islands Forum and the South Pacific Defense Ministers Meeting are hugely important for states in the Pacific region. These fora provide small Pacific Island states with an avenue to amplify our voices to address common and emerging security challenges. The establishment of the Pacific Response Group by the South Pacific Defense Ministers Meeting is a recent example of how a regional forum can and has been able to provide a new response mechanism for the Pacific. The first deployment of the Pacific Response Group to Vanuatu in December 2024, in response to the earthquake, illustrates how this new mechanism can respond to regional security issues. And therefore, we acknowledge and respect the roles of the respective security architectures, be they bilateral or multilateral, as such as this IISS dialogue, as a very important forum for smaller nations like ours to find our place. The Pacific Response Group provides us with a clear example that the existing defense dialogue architecture can respond to regional security challenges. Rapid military modernization and the advancements in technology are challenging and changing the security landscape. And the nature of defense strategy, as amplified yesterday, such as the advancement in artificial intelligence, cyber, drones, hypersonic weapons, and robotics. These advancements present significant challenges to smaller developing nations in the region, like Papua New Guinea. I'm sure our existing security forums will rise to respond to these challenges as we have always done. As outlined throughout my remarks, defense cooperation holds immense potential for small states to navigate the complexities of modern security landscape and secure a peaceful and prosperous future for its people. By working together with our region and international partners, we can overcome the challenges we face and build a more secure and resilient world for generations to come. We cannot afford to stagnate our existing security mechanisms. They need to be flexible, adaptive, and evolve to ensure that they can be able to respond to new and emerging security challenges. As a Pacific nation, Papua New Guinea stands ready to contribute to this noble endeavor, and we look forward to forging stronger bonds of friendship and cooperation with all nations represented here today. And I want to reiterate the remarks of the Prime Minister from Malaysia and the current chair to ASEAN as he spoke yesterday, that engagement between countries is the key to addressing our security challenges. We believe in regional cooperation, in multilateral dialogue, openness, diplomacy, and in strengthening the systems we have. Let us focus on building resilience and preventing conflict together. Thank you.
Minister, thank you very much for your remarks, and I think we can say that the voice of Pacific Island nation has been growing in the framework of the Shangri-La dialogue, and so I think it's very good that you added your voice to this conversation and explained how the mechanisms that you alluded to help amplify understanding of the challenges that you face and build avenues for cooperation. Thank you very much. Paul Jonsson, if I can invite you please to take the podium.
Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, many thanks for IISS for once again bringing us together to discuss security cooperation in the Indo-Pacific. I'm also honored to share this stage with two partners from the region, and I also want to congratulate my colleague from Singapore on your appointment as Minister of Defense on the 23rd of May. Sweden and Singapore shares a long history of defense cooperation, ranging from submarines to defense innovation to the total defense concept and resilience. And I think that our relationship is a good example how two smaller countries from different parts of the world can work closely together to enhance our common security. Ladies and gentlemen, this is my third consecutive time that I'm attending the Shangri-La dialogue. I always make a point of saying I come here to learn and I come here to listen and not to preach, as I know we Europeans tend to do. But it's a most rewarding experience, I must underline. And in these past years, the global security landscape has become and grown even more complex, more contested, and more interconnected. In essence, strategic competition has indeed sharpened. To adapt to this new security landscape, I firmly believe that our two regions, the Euro-Atlantic region and the Indo-Pacific regions, need to do three things. First, we need to understand each other's security. Second, we need to commit to each other's security. And thirdly, we need also to enhance each other's security. Firstly, in order to understand each other's security, we also have to speak openly about the threats that we face. And I think that President Macron and Secretary Hegseth did a very good job also in conveying some of those aspects. And in Europe, we're facing the worst security environment since the end of the Second World War. Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine is now in its fourth year. More than 1 million people has been killed or seriously wounded. Russia's goal to control Ukraine remain unchanged. In my immediate neighborhood in the Baltic Sea, we're faced with increasing hybrid operations, ranging from acts of sabotage, threats against undersea critical infrastructure, and challenges posed by Russia's shadow fleet. Ladies and gentlemen, no one wants peace more than Ukraine, and Ukraine's readiness for a full, unconditional ceasefire is met by Russian maximalist demands and an unwillingness to negotiate in good faith. This is why our number one priority is to urgently accelerate our military support to Ukraine, so Ukraine can negotiate a fair and sustainable peace from a position of strength. So far, we've provided Ukraine with 8 billion of military support. And I cannot emphasize this enough. This conflict is about a rules-based international order. A rules-based international order is extremely important, particularly for smaller countries like myself. This is also why I think that the broad participation of the Ukraine Defense Contact Group, including from many faraway countries, also in the Indo-Pacific region, is so important. And I get it. This is a conflict that is much closer to Europe than to the Indo-Pacific region, but we very much appreciate those who provide political support for Ukraine or even defense material. And I want to convey our gratitude in this regard. In addition, the increasing convergence of interest in cooperation between Russia, China, Iran, and North Korea is a threat also to our security. China's enabling Russia's war of aggression against Ukraine has also direct negative impacts on European security. North Korea's direct military support to Russia, including its deployments of thousands of combat troops on the European continent, is not only a dangerous expansion on the ongoing support to Russia, but it also risks degrading security on the Korean peninsula. These developments underline the interconnected nature of our security threats. Now, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, we're sometimes asked why Sweden wants to increase our engagement to the Indo-Pacific region when we're facing such serious threats at home. The answer is simple. To improve our regional security, we need to commit to each other's security. So when the rules-based order is challenged in one part of the world, it has consequences in other parts of the world too. That was true during the Korean War in the 1950s, and that's also why Sweden still maintains a military presence in the demilitarized zone so many years afterwards. And that's also why Sweden now is increasing its military engagement into the Indo-Pacific. We are part of the British-led Operation High Mast. We exercise here, and later this year we're also seconding staff officers to Indo-PACOM. We do this with a commitment to our partners in the region, and we want to contribute to peace and stability. But also, of course, to increase our understanding of the security challenges in this region. After all, this is important for a trade and innovation-driven economy like Sweden, which is reliant on good trading relations with partners around the world. And Sweden supports a free, open, and inclusive Indo-Pacific. Safe sea lines of communications and freedom of navigations are core security interests to our security. And we firmly believe in the sovereignty of nations, the importance of upholding international law and peaceful resolution of disputes. We are concerned by actions that undermine trust and stability, that raise tensions and risk leading to escalation, including dangerous and assertive behavior in the South China Sea. Our message is clear. Competition must not lead to confrontation, and with great power comes great responsibility. We welcome the effort by ASEAN and other regional partners in promoting dialogue and de-escalation. Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, to enhance each other's security, we also need to strengthen partnership. Because of our long tradition of being NATO's closest partner for 30 years, we truly understand the value of close partnership. We therefore welcome the closer cooperation between NATO and the Indo-PAC 4 countries. It helps us to share security challenges and lessons learned on hybrid threat, on resilience and disinformation. We are also pleased that the EU is increasing its engagement in the Indo-Pacific. We are particularly welcome an even closer partnership between EU and ASEAN, which is an important platform for exchange of views on security in our region. One of the most promising ways to deepen our partnership is through defense innovation and defense industrial collaboration. This includes both the new breeds of civilian startups that are putting a lot of efforts into solving military challenges, as well as, of course, traditional defense industry. When we share technology, we co-develop innovation into capabilities, we build resilient supply chains, it strengthens deterrence, but it also builds trust between trusted partners and allies. And it creates interdependence and makes conflict less likely and cooperation more rewarding. That's also one of the reasons why Sweden has has joined the Partnership for Indo-Pacific Industrial Resilience, or the so-called PIPER initiative. Through this, we've been able to share our experience from the Nordic cooperation, how to increase production of ammunitions. Your Excellencies, to sum up, if we want you in the Indo-Pacific to be interested in our security problems, and they predominantly right now center around Ukraine, we have to be interested in yours. We get that, and that's only reasonable. And that's why I'm glad that we have a big European participation here today. So when we understand each other's security better, we can support each other better, and we can enhance each other's security better. This creates lasting partnership that will make us stronger, safer, and more connected. Thank you very much, and I look forward to continuing the dialogue.
Well, thank you very much for those remarks, and just want to underline your understand, commit, enhance a framework of thinking through the challenges and the engagement and the partnership. And I'm glad you also mentioned NATO's work with the IP4, and of course there is a NATO summit coming up in a little over 3 weeks, where there might also be an opportunity to pick up on that theme. So, Minister Chan, may I invite you to take the podium? It is, I think, day 10 of you as the Defense Minister, but you've been here before in other capacities. Minister.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, a very good morning to all of you. Thank you for attending the 22nd edition of the SLD. This is my first SLD as the Defense Minister of Singapore. I've attended various editions of the SLD in my previous capacities, and it's good to be back here to reconnect with old friends and make some new ones. SLD has continued to grow. We have more than 40 ministerial level representatives, over 40 chiefs of defense forces, senior defense officials from around 47 countries. This is a positive testimony to the value of SLD as a platform for open and frank dialogue to secure peace and avoid conflicts. From the numerous conversations I've had this SLD, there are two common themes that have stayed with me. The first is that there's been a shift in how we conceive security. While we used to conceive security challenges in terms of conflicts in geographical locales, there is now a strong sense that the security of different regions are intertwined by challenges that cross boundaries, such as the security of our supply chains, countering disinformation, and protecting the security and integrity of our cyber infrastructure. The second is about the rules-based order and how international laws and norms are important in preventing conflict. Yet, as we speak, this order is fraying. And because of that, we live in dangerous times. Listening to the views of our esteemed speakers over the last few days, I would like to share 3 observations. First, going alone is not the answer to insecurity. Throughout history, heightened insecurity has often driven empires and nations of the past to try to mitigate risks by reducing their dependence on others. Prioritizing one's security is not wrong. Everyone does that. However, this quest must be pursued alongside a firm commitment to international laws and norms, which set the rules of what is acceptable state behavior. If there is no trust that countries will act in accordance to these rules, then the quest for one's security could easily lead to greater insecurity in others. We would then fall into a vicious spiral where attempts to overcome one's insecurity begets greater insecurity. My security first should not become my security only. Otherwise, we all fall victim of the prisoner's dilemma, where the pursuit of self-interest leads to less ideal outcomes, both individually and collectively. This applies not only to the military domain, but to all forms of security. Economic insecurities mirror military insecurities. Malaysian Prime Minister Datuk Sri Anwar Ibrahim made a similar point yesterday. When trade falters, the consequences ripple far beyond any one region. Economic insecurity, be it widening domestic inequalities, inability to secure one's economic lifelines, or to achieve economic growth through fair economic competition, can all combine to heighten the risks of military conflict. History has numerous examples of countries and empires pursuing aggressive expansionism to secure trade routes and economic resources as a response to domestic economic insecurity. We live in an increasingly dangerous world now, not unlike almost a century ago, where economic insecurities during the Great Depression led to beggar-thy-neighbor policies, which historians would argue contributed to the expansionist and irredentist foreign policies that eventually culminated in World War II. Competition and cooperation are not mutually exclusive. The greater the competition, be it in the security or economic domains, the more we need guardrails to ensure that competition does not descend into conflict. These guardrails include commitment to resolve dispute peacefully and in accordance to international laws, channels of communications so that we remain open to de-escalation, and confidence-building measures to reduce the risk of miscalculations. Take Singapore and Malaysia, for example. In 2003, Malaysia initiated international arbitration under UNCLOS against Singapore over disagreements about our reclamation works. Both sides respected the International Tribunal for the Law of the Sea's direction to conduct a joint study of the impact of the reclamation works. Both countries managed to reach an amicable settlement. While the issue began with acrimony, the warmth and civility between the negotiating teams led to an amicable resolution. Today, Singapore and Malaysia continue to have our differences, but as Datuk Sri Anwar has said, we have continued to deepen our cooperation, and the Johor-Singapore Special Economic Zone is a different kind of border defined not by division, but by a united by a shared purpose. It is in our common interest, therefore, to ensure that these guardrails remain relevant to all and build new guardrails to manage emerging security challenges. Next, international cooperation starts with domestic confidence. US Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth said that credible deterrence starts at home. For Singapore, we recognize that capability development is a long-term endeavor that transcends political cycles, and we must have the confidence and the determination to stay the course in our investment in our defense capabilities. But international cooperation and effective diplomacy must also start with domestic confidence. And this is the point. International cooperation starts with domestic confidence. externalizing one's domestic issues cannot be the solution to one's domestic challenges. On the other hand, domestic cohesion, policy coherence, and leadership continuity enable countries to build credibility, and it is easier to work and negotiate with a credible partner. A secure government with the strong support of its people will have the leadership confidence to sustain strategic partnerships to address common security challenges, reach mutually beneficial agreements to resolve disagreements peacefully, and play an active and constructive role in shaping and upholding the rules of our global order. And one can say the converse is also true. Hence, domestic security and external security must be mutually reinforcing. One cannot happen without the other. Political and military leaders must arrest the instinct or temptation to go it alone when they feel insecure. Only then can we avoid conflict and keep the peace. My third and final point is that all states have agency and responsibilities. I'm glad that French President Emmanuel Macron spoke about strategic autonomy and sovereignty. In a fragmenting global security and economic order, it is tempting for small states, including many of us in Southeast Asia, to ask whether agency is possible and if we must choose a side. The strategic context for us in the region is as such. It is said that China's presence is a geostrategic reality. The US engagement of Southeast Asia is a geostrategic policy. And if so, Southeast Asia engagement of the US, China, and others must be our geostrategic necessity. For Singapore, we believe that taking sides regardless of issues and context breeds irrelevance. And if one is irrelevant, it will almost certainly require to take sides. If we have to choose sides, may we choose the side of principles. Principles that uphold a global order where we do not descend into the law of the jungle, where the mighty do what they wish and the weak suffer what they must. Singapore will choose the side of principles that promote a more integrated global economic and security order underpinned by international law and sovereignty and sovereign equality, where states big and small have a fair chance to compete and can improve the lives of our people through trade and not war. We believe that all states big and small have agency and also responsibilities to uphold the global economic and security order for our common benefit. This is why Singapore is committed to work with like-minded partners and weave a web of bilateral, plurilateral, multilateral networks for the common good. Any functioning global rules-based economic and security order must be able to address the emerging challenges of the day and the challenges of tomorrow. Openness and inclusivity are important because all stakeholders must feel that they have a voice in shaping the rules. I'm glad that the EU High Representative, Kaja Kallas, as well as New Zealand's Defence Minister Judith Collins and France Minister of the Armed Forces, Sébastien Lecornu, raised a very salient emerging challenge. That is the security of our critical underwater infrastructure. This is one area where we cannot go alone. As our critical underwater infrastructure cuts across national boundaries, we must work together to secure our access to data and energy. This applies to our underwater critical infrastructure as much as it applies to our conventional critical infrastructures, because in a network, you can't defend by only looking at a point. In a network, we must defend the network as a team. Together with our ASEAN partners, Singapore will play our part by raising awareness and developing a set of principles to facilitate defense cooperation on critical underwater infrastructure security in our region. And to all the powers of the world, the greater one's power, the greater is one's responsibility. All great powers can choose to demonstrate the power of its example, or it can choose to demonstrate the example of its power. So we all have a choice to make. We can all demonstrate the power of our example, or to demonstrate the example of our power. So ladies and gentlemen, our security and prosperity depend on our ability to work together. A more prosperous world is a less dangerous world. To get to a more prosperous world, we all need to work together, not just on the military security front, but also on the economic security front. And Singapore will continue to actively contribute towards upholding the rules-based order, and the SLD is one way we play our part. Your contributions here are important in making our world a safer place for everyone. And before I end, let me take this opportunity to thank all the people who have worked tirelessly behind the scenes, the IISS, the staff of Shangri-La Hotel, the security forces, and also our media friends who have amplified our voices for peace. Because of your hard work, we are able to pursue our quest for peace. I wish everyone a safe journey home, and we look forward to seeing you again next year. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Minister. Thank you for underlining the value of the Shangri-La dialogue as a forum for open and frank dialogue, some of which we will now engage in. But I hope that people took note of your very carefully constructed framework of geostrategic reality, geostrategic policy, and geostrategic necessity as the foundation for that choice of siding with the principles, as you explained in your speech. So I might again call upon 7 or 8 people to give us a first round of comments before we return to the ministers, and then we will be able to get a second round in. And first one is from Myanmar and the Young Leaders Group, Isabella Ong.
My question is for Minister Chan. Good morning. The SAC in Myanmar employs widespread use of emerging technologies to target pro-democracy Myanmar nationals abroad through transnational surveillance and repression. There has even been multiple incidents of Singaporean permanent residents, Myanmar nationals, being targeted by the SAC. So as a nation hosting approximately 200,000 Myanmar people, what can Singapore do to better protect these people from transnational repression, both online and offline? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And from the United States, Colin Clark.
What actions do you think will convince China to change its behavior in the Indo-Pacific and stop acting in violation of international law, claiming waters it does not have a right to?
Colin, I imagine that's for the entire panel.
Yes.
You didn't direct that at anybody in particular, so we'll take that for the entire panel. Can I have next, please, from Indonesia and the Young Leaders Group, Jasmine Afina. Jasmine.
Thank you very much. Good morning, and thank you for these very constructive and thoughtful comments and presentations by the panel. I have a couple of questions. So first is, what are the key security concerns, challenges, and worries related to AI in the military domain that are unique to smaller nations, in particular Papua New Guinea and the Pacific Islands? And my second question is, what is the role of smaller nations in enhancing regional peace, security, and an international rule-based order that, as as mentioned before, is frail at the moment, particularly in the face of emerging and digital technologies that are borderless and blur the lines between the civilian and the military domains. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And from China, Yin Lu.
Thank you, Chair. My question goes to Minister Chen. With respect, my question on cooperation is not so appropriate at the atmosphere of this Shangri-La dialogue platform. It seems that labeling China, blaming China, verbally attacking China are political right here. Still, no matter how China is misinterpreted, China will develop in its peaceful way. So back to my question. On cooperation, what do you think, Minister, what do you think should be the respective roles of different countries in this region, big or small, ASEAN or non-ASEAN, in stabilizing the development-oriented situation in the Asia-Pacific? How can effective security cooperation counter possible common challenges in this region, including you mentioned the law of jungle? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And from the United Kingdom, Richard Lloyd Parry.
Thank you. In his speech on Friday, President Macron issued a call for action for the countries of Europe and Asia to create a new coalition of independence, as he called it, united in refusing to choose between the US and China. So I'd like to ask Dr. Joseph whether PNG will join President Macron's coalition, or will you in fact be forced to choose a side in the contest of the superpowers? And for Mr. Chan, you touched on this question of choosing a side and said that we have to choose the side of principle. I'm not quite sure what that means. Does that mean you're not choosing a side? And if you look at the United States and China, are either of those governments principled in their approach?
Thank you very much. Ben Schreier from Germany.
Thank you, Bastian. My question goes to Defense Minister Jonsson. Thank you for your excellent speech where you outlined Sweden's goal to further enhance its defense engagement in the region. Do you foresee a future participation of Sweden in regional military exercises through the deployments of your own air or maritime assets? Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'll take two more in this round, and then I'll turn to the ministers for some responses. And just to put you on notice, we might go in reverse order for the responses. But can I now have, please, from Japan, Akita Hiroyuki.
Thank you. My question is very simple. It is about the assessment of the risk of simultaneous war, both in Europe and in the Pacific. So my question is mainly directed to Minister Jonsson and maybe Minister Shin. If the highest risk is rank A, and if lowest risk is rank D, where do you think we are now in terms of the risk of simultaneous war? Because you mentioned about, you expressed a concern about the enhanced military cooperation between China and Russia, North Korea and Russia, which means that both Europe and Asia are being connected by the axis of war. So it seems that you are implying that there is an increasing risk of a simultaneous war. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And finally, for this round, from India and the IISS, Darshana Barua.
Thank you, Bastian. I have two questions. One, first to Minister of Defense Sweden. Sweden is one of the few countries with a policy guidelines for the Indo-Pacific. But given US's consistent emphasis that Europe should focus on Europe and reinvest in Europe, what would be your top defense priority for a practical Indo-Pacific commitment at this point? My second question is to Dr. Joseph. The Pacific Islands collectively have been voicing about the dangers of climate change and climate inaction. How do you balance your priorities with your close partners and friends in the broader region who are more affected by growing tensions from great power competition and conflict and feel less impacted by climate? Thank you.
Thank you very much. So let us return to the panel for a few responses. Coordinating Minister of Defense, you had a few that were put to you directly. There was one related to Myanmar, and there was one B on the role of different countries in stabilizing the Asia-Pacific region. There were questions put to you on how would you rank currently the risk for simultaneous war. You can, of course, apply your own metric if you don't like the A to D. There were a few other points as well that you might want to address that were put to the panel overall on AI, on what might need to be done to convince China to change its behavior, and a few other comments. But I'll leave it to you to put emphasis on where you want to respond first.
Thank you, Bastian. Thank you for your questions. I think there are quite a number of questions in different parts, but let me address them briefly. First, on Myanmar, Singapore, we are very clear. We do not allow other people to import their politics into our country. The future of Myanmar is to be determined by the Myanmarese people, and likewise, the future of Singapore is to be determined by Singaporeans. We keep a very close watch of other people trying to influence our local domestic politics, and we will certainly not allow other people to use us as a platform to further their own domestic agenda. That applies to the situation that you talk about. It also applies in a broader context. Second set of issues, what can small states do? I think it's quite evident that small states do have agency and responsibility. And many of the small states or smaller states can come together, speak up, build their capabilities, and try to uphold the rule of international law. That's why even on the international circuit, you have the Forum of Small States, you have various multilateral, plurilateral, bilateral collaborations, all in different areas to try to uphold the rule of law. But having said that, I think we as smaller states are realistic. We don't expect people to deal with us on the basis of sympathy nor charity. For us to be relevant, we need to be successful, we need to have real value add, and that requires effort. No one will deal with any state, big or small, if they are not relevant, nor successful. And when one country, one state, is not relevant or successful, then that one country becomes susceptible to being either bullied or bribed, as the saying goes. So I think all of us have a responsibility to invest in our long-term capability development so that we can contribute positively. So I think this is the first step in what small states can do. The second step is that having been successful, let's look at the issues and ask ourselves, what are those principles that will best enable us to survive and thrive? And that goes to a related questions about Singaporean and Singapore choosing the side of principles. We don't look at issues based on the fact as who are the protagonists and so decide our position. Instead, we look at every situation very carefully to decide what are the principles that are at stake. Take the Ukraine conflict as an example. There are different levels of interest. Some people are interested in the Ukraine conflict because it disrupted the supply chains, it disrupted the economic security of various countries worldwide. Some people are interested in the Ukraine conflict because of the very issue of sovereignty. And these are all valid concerns. But if I may suggest, the highest order of concern for all of us should be the principles of how we conduct international relationships. And what is this one principle that we hold dear in deciding our position? Is simply this. If one country, whether big or small, can march into another country on the basis that they will want to right the wrongs of history, then I think we live in a very dangerous world. And certainly for Singapore, because we have only been independent for the last 60 years. If any country can march into another country to try to rewrite history or to right the wrongs of history from their perception, then I think it leaves very little room for small countries to be who they want to be. And I think that principle must be upheld by all countries, big and small. So for Singapore, there are a set of principles that contributed and underpin our survival and success. And when we assess any particular issue, we look at that very carefully from this perspective. Have we taken positions in our history that is not aligned to the positions of the big powers? Yes, certainly so. Ever since our independence in 1965, when any major issue come across our desk, so to speak, we look at it very carefully. There have been instances in history where superpowers went in to another country, a smaller country, and we objected. There have been instances whereby the rules on the freedom of navigation has been violated, and we have objected. And when we did all this in the past, people have asked us, aren't you afraid that you will be penalized by these bigger powers because you didn't support their position? Of course, there are risks, but there is a greater risk that when principles are not upheld by countries big and small, we live in a more dangerous world. On the issue of working with China and the Chinese and understanding the Chinese perspective, I would say this. It is in the interest of all of us to work with China, and it is also in the interest of China to work with everyone else in the world. It is in the interest of all of us to better, deeper understand China's fears, concerns, and aspirations, just as it is important for China to understand how the rest of the world perceive China. If China perceives that the world does not respect China sufficiently or do not understand China sufficiently, then it is incumbent upon China to use every opportunity possible, including the Shangri-La dialogue, to get its voice heard, to make clear its stance, and to help others to understand why it's doing what it is doing. And that was why I said what I said yesterday to the media, that regardless of whether China attends the Shangri-La dialogue, it's incumbent upon all of us also to reach out to China in different forums to try to build those bridges so that we do not end up in a situation whereby either side misinterpret or miscalculate or misrepresent each other's position. And that is dangerous. That is dangerous. So I would encourage both China and the rest of the world to to have more dialogues, to create more opportunities for people to meet, especially the younger generation, for them to meet and to build trust, to deeply understand one another. Even in Singapore, in my previous portfolio as the Minister for Education, I've always reminded my students never to claim that they know China just because they have visited Beijing, Shanghai, or Guangzhou. On a similar note, I always remind all my students to never claim that they understand the US just because they have been to New York, California, and so forth. And it's incumbent upon all of us to make that special effort to try to understand another country deeply so that we do not end up being simplistic in our interpretation, because that can cause us to read other people's intent wrongly, and that sets for a much more dangerous world. So perhaps with that, I will
Thank you
hand
very
the
much,
floor back
Minister.
to Bastian.
And let me just underline that, of course, from the perspective of the IISS, we very much welcome and encourage a full participation and active participation of China in the Shangri-La dialogue. Paul, if I can turn to you, there were 3 points that were put to you directly. Will Sweden participate in regional military exercises? What kind of assets might it deploy if it does? How do you feel about the risk of simultaneous war in Europe and the Pacific? And then perhaps tied to the exercises, you can tie in Sweden's top priorities for, to make a practical contribution in the Pacific. And then if you want to pick up on the more general themes, feel free.
Absolutely. All right. Thank you very much. I'll go with Ben's questions first. Sweden's readiness to participate into exercises into the region. We did indeed participate in Cobra Gold in Thailand. We also participated in Australia, in Tasmania, on the Sabre exercises. There is an interest especially surrounded our Air Force and our dispersed system. So we use that as a sort of defense diplomacy as well, to spreading our knowledge and our experience about the dispersed forces for the dispersed systems of our Air Force. The legitimate question is, what can smaller countries bring to the table when it comes to security cooperation? I tell you what we can't do. We can't offer you security guarantees, Article 5, Common Defense Planning. Smaller states don't do volume and scale on the kinetic sides very well, but we're given a lot of thought what we can do. We have a special agency for psychological defense, for example, which has a great outreach to many countries here in the region. That's and have a high level of expertise on identifying disinformation operations, to analyze them and also to respond to them. That's something we can do. We can reach out to that. We reach out also when it comes to resilience and a total defense concept. That's something we worked in Sweden for many decades to create a more resilient society. We have very much hands-on expertise to that, that we also use in our international engagement. We do it on cyber quite extensively as well. This is also one of the things where I think that smaller states can engage quite literally. Last point I would point out is actually on innovation and defense innovation. Now, both Sweden and Singapore are smaller countries, but we are top-notch when it comes to innovation. I know you rank number 2 in the world. We're number 3. We can share some of the experiences when it comes to defense innovation as well, because we are both countries who invest very heavily into civilian R&D, and right now we have also picked up a lot of lessons from the war in Ukraine, where, of course, the innovation cycles, instead of 5 or 6 years, can be 5 or 6 months. Also on underwater critical infrastructure and protection and seabed warfare. Unfortunately, we had a very steep learning curve in the Baltic Sea about that as well. So I think those are some of the things that we stand open to engage to and share our experience and also learn from others, even though we are a small state. Now, in regard also from the young leader's question from Indonesia, what else? What we have an Indo-Pacific guideline, we engage into what we're doing right now, and that's diplomacy and learning from others. I think that is absolutely key, and also anything that's related also to defense material acquisition and innovation. And just to bring an example, every time I come to Shangri-La Dialogue, I met with some of your officers who's been submariners in Sweden. And you have hundreds of families who've gone to Sweden to be trained in Sweden, and establishing this kind of people-to-people relationship, which you do in defense world, I think that's extremely important, and that's something we'd like to build on as well. That's why I particularly brought up cooperation around technology, innovation, and defense material, and the kind of long-term perspective that builds between countries. I think that's great. Now, last point, also the connection between the Euro-Atlantic region and the Indo-Pacific region. I don't necessarily think it's hydraulic, that automatically one thing's happen in one region, but then it happens immediately at the others. But for sure, I think there are many watchers right now on seeing how steady the Euro-Atlantic community is in its resolve to continue supporting Ukraine. And that's why I think there would be a very great reputational damage for us, and it would undermine our credibility if we not continue supporting Ukraine so we can negotiate from a position of strength. I think the other message I want to convey, and we Europeans, we get it. This is the time for a wake-up call in Europe, where we, after decades of underinvestment into our armed forces, after decades of pressing the snooze button, even though have been warned that of a serious security environment, that we have to be seriously committing into investing into defense. And I do expect the NATO Hague Summit to end up that to have a defense investments pledge of about 5%, or with at least 3.5% is going to go to direct defense expenditures in Europe. That's going to transform Europe, and it's going to make Europe also a better and more able partner. So I think Europe taking a larger responsibility for its own security is long overdue. We are seriously and committed, and we are encouraged by our American friends also to go that pathway. Thank you.
Marvelous. Thank you, Paul. Minister, you had also a few things that were put to you directly. There was a question on how you feel about President Macron's coalition of the independents and whether that's something that you would embrace. There was a question to you also about climate priorities and how to balance and in the context of great power competition. So maybe you'll take those two in particular, and if you would like to comment on any of the other themes, feel free to do that as well. Minister.
Thank you. Before I answer some of the questions that were posed to me, I'd like to make a few remarks. And the first one is that for the peoples of the Pacific, climate change and nuclear proliferation are a very important existential threat that pose peoples of the Pacific. And smaller Pacific Island countries like Papua New Guinea are very cognizant of these threats, especially, like I said, climate change and nuclear proliferation. It is also important to note that economy and security are interlinked. They are intimately linked to smaller Pacific Island countries. And decisions are made that may be economic, but it also affects security. Having said that, we have very close relationship with many of our traditional partners, and we are very also cognizant of the interest of our friends in the region. So with regards to one of the questions that was posed on what can be done to change the behavior of China in the Indo-Pacific, and I support many of us who have been speaking here in this forum that dialogue and constant dialogue is the way to go. The role of AI and cybersecurity in the Indo-Pacific, and for smaller nations like Papua New Guinea, it is again linked to economy. Decisions on investment in cybersecurity and AI, we're facing these challenges in our country as well. The cognitive domain in which social media like Facebook and Twitter and all that are bombarded with misinformation and fake information, driving people and policy changes in our countries are also real, and it affects us. In terms of investment in such, resource-challenged countries like ours are facing challenges, and we're working with our partners, our traditional partners, as well as partners that we trust, where we have mutual strategic trust with to address those challenges. In regards to the question of which side should we choose, I do believe that we should not be put in a position where we choose sides. You know, it's not fair, and we choose, if we have to choose, then we choose on the side, and we will be on the side that forges and encourage international rules-based order and a free and open Indo-Pacific. And we will advocate for that at all times. And on climate change, as I said, climate change is an existential threat. And we will urge, while we focus on the security in the Indo-Pacific, the climate change issue is an existential threat for our countries. And we're working with our partners, especially Australia and the US, and others that we work with to deal with the climate change issues, but at the same time, those issues are also linked to security.
Thank you very much. We might take a second round of 4 or 5 interventions and then come back to the panel for their concluding thoughts and answers. First one in this round from the Young Leaders Group and from Australia, Matthew DeLeo. Matthew.
Thank you. This is for the whole panel. The core of our rules-based multilateral system emerged in the paradigm of 1945, a world that in many ways no longer exists. The UN system is imperfect, but it would be self-defeating to dismiss it. Yet for credibility, rules must evolve to meet the current moment. So where do panelists see the most critical areas for effective systemic reform? And how can the system become more inclusive of the security priorities of smaller countries and the global south? Thank you.
Thank you very much. From the United States, Paul Froley. Paul.
Thank you, Bastian. My question is for Minister Chan. On Friday, you signed a declaration of intent with France's Defense Minister Le Cornu, part of which will lead to enhanced defense cooperation on emerging technologies and artificial intelligence. I'm wondering if you can add some context on the rationale for this agreement and what capabilities you hope might emerge from it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And we have from China, Xiangqiu Gao.
Thank you, Speaker. For this dialogue, some speakers talked a lot about the South China Sea issue. Here, I just want to highlight that China's claims in the South China Sea is absolutely legal and legitimate. But owing to the time limit, I don't want to elaborate on that. If you like, you can find enough material to prove that. My question is to the Dr. Jonsson, Defense Minister of Sweden. In your speech, you mentioned that Sweden will strengthen its engagement with Asia-Pacific countries. My question is, how will Sweden engage with China? What kind of measures will you take to build confidence and deepen mutual understanding with China? Thank you.
Thank you very much. We take from the Young Leaders Group and from Japan, Riho Aizawa.
Thank you very much. I have a question to Minister Billy Joseph about capacity building initiatives with Japan and others. It was a pleasure for Japan to host you in Tokyo last year for the JPIT, Japan Pacific Islands Defense Dialogue, as part of our ongoing engagement in this region. I will be grateful for your advice on how we can make our cooperation with your country and other Pacific Island countries more effective. As you know, many partners, including Australia, New Zealand, US, France, UK, Canada, Chile, and Japan, are conducting our various capacity building projects in this region in the Pacific. But at times we see overlaps and duplications. So from your perspective, what will be the most effective way to enhance coordination and ensure that such cooperation truly reflects your regional priorities, support your strategic autonomy, and contributes to long-term regional stability? Thank you.
Thank you so much. I might try to sneak in 3 more from Germany, Kurt Lauk.
Thank you, Bastian. The security is dependent, as we heard from all participants at the panel, that the infrastructure, sea infrastructure, cables and so on, is very important for stability. We haven't talked, as far as I can see, not talked about the new emerging infrastructure, which is the infrastructure in space. The infrastructure, prime example is SpaceX, but Jeff Bezos has development. China is developing the same thing with a goal of about 30,000 satellites around by 35 at the latest. This is of commercial significance, of technological significance, and last but not least, of military significance. So the question to Mr. Johnson, Europe seems to be left out, or do you want to continue to rely on the United States for that service? And the same question is to Mr. Chan, do you see a possibility to cooperate in Asia to come up with an alternative system?
Thank you very much. From the United Kingdom, Henry Boyd.
Thank you, Bastian. In light of the continual references to potential threats to critical undersea infrastructure, what practical steps can be taken to improve regional states' undersea domain awareness capabilities, both individually and collectively? Thank you.
Thank you very much. And we will take from Australia, Rory Metcalf.
Thank you. My question is to Dr. Joseph from PNG. To really amplify the point made by a Japanese colleague a moment ago, in practical terms, given the breadth of potential partners represented in this room, what are your priorities to secure PNG as a resilient democracy connected to the region? What are you looking for in security partnerships from the region?
Thank you, Rory. And we take from Indonesia and the Young Leader Group, Rati Kabinawa.
Okay, thank you very much for the opportunity. My questions directed to the Minister Chan from Singapore. I'm interested in your concept of self-determination, that you mentioned that the future of Singapore is to be determined by the Singaporean and so on and so forth. So I would like to shift this concept of self-determination to the case of Taiwan. How do you think that this concept of self-determination applied to the case of Taiwan, given that mounting our regular intrusion from the Chinese government, and also China always mentioned that Taiwan, it seems that Taiwan has no voice in regional and multilateral institutions. So how do you elaborate the concept of this self-determination applies to the case of Taiwan? Thank you.
Thank you very much. And the last question from Thailand and the Young Leader Group, Surachani Srijai.
Thank you, Chair. My question is for Minister Chan, just a follow-up question from your comments on Myanmar. Minister, the recent report from Justice for Myanmar have reported that companies across Southeast Asia, including in those in your country and my country as well, are supplying Myanmar military regimes with revenue, technology, and even jet fuel to sustain its ongoing nationwide terror campaigns. So my question to you is, perhaps you could share your view on the role of state-owned enterprises and as well as private sector in indirectly prolonging the conflict or potentially interfering in the conflict momentum, and what can be done about it?
Thank you very much. So the only people who are left on the list who I haven't called upon are all colleagues of mine, so I hope they forgive me, but we have a good set of questions now to get into, and we'll go in the original order of the panel. So, Billy Joseph, I'll turn to you first. You had, again, a few points that were specific for you, so in terms of what would you like to see in terms of capacity building initiatives, make sure that the overlap is limited and that everything is aligned with your priorities and regional priorities. There was the point about as a resilient democracy connected to the region. What are you looking for in security partnerships? And please feel free to pick up on other points that were raised. If we can try everyone to do their remarks in 3 minutes each, that would be fantastic.
All right, thank you. I would like to thank the question from Japan. Japan is a very important partner for Papua New Guinea, and I would like to say that we do have a lot of trade and relationship with them. Most of the infrastructures in the country have been built by Japan. So in the question as to what more can be done to build capacity, I think we need to look at the trade partnership, the economic activities that are being done in the country. Japan need to take more interest, and also at the same time, HDR, investment in HDR would go a long way. As I said, the effect of climate change is really felt in some countries in the Pacific, including mine. So that is something that we are working with, and Japan is working with our defense to build capacity, and there are many different levels we are working with that, which I don't have to say it. With regards to the question from Australia on, what was the question again?
Priorities for PNG as a resilient democracy, what are you looking for in terms of security partnerships to support that?
Yes, we have, PNG got independence from Australia, so we also have very strong relationship with the US and others as well. And the relationships that we have had over the time since we became, it will be 50 years independent this year. And these 50 years, we have never had any military coup of any sort in our country. And that goes to show the resilience that we have had and the democratic principles that we subscribe to. And so we stick with our traditional partners when it comes to security and defense. And we continue to communicate. In the last few years, we've had Papua New Guinea and Australian ministers at the highest level communicating every year on how we can both work together to meet some of the security challenges, but also the economic issues that we face.
Thank you very much. Paul, can I turn to you? There was the question about space infrastructure, relying on the US, other European options. There was the question put to you about engaging with China, what measures you might be willing and able to take. And then there were general questions about the reforming the multilateral system as well, undersea domain awareness. Oh.
Okay, all right, thank you very much, and once again, thank you so much for putting me on the panel. Few remarks then on space. This is an area where Europe should be doing more, and we are actually, in Sweden, we have the only autonomous capability actually to launch polar orbital satellites, and it's something we are developing and we're investing into before. There has been good developments in the past for creating autonomy inside the EU. I'm thinking about the Copernicus program and Galileo program, but where I think that Europe is a bit lagging behind, where I think that the US have been quicker on its feet, and that's the commercialization and the volumes and scale that goes with commercialization, and I think that's where SpaceX is all about. Now we're learning a lot about space also from our Ukrainian friends, where the space is extremely important for communication, identification, and also targeting, of course. So I think we are building up, but I think especially accommodating the commercial sector into space, I think is crucial, as this is a domain that's developing so much due to technological developments when it comes to transmission capacity and miniaturization. Now, in regards to China, we don't seek confrontation with China, but when we don't agree with China, we will also say so if we feel it's in violation of international laws and sea lines of communications. We do stand ready also to engage and have a dialogue with China, as we do right now, and we welcome this kind of dialogue. I think that was commendably said, how important this dialogue is. We had the Minister of Trade who was in China a few weeks ago. I also know that the State Secretary at the Ministry of Defense, at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs was in China as well. So dialogue we welcome, and when we don't see eye to eye, then we will also say so, especially when it comes to issues that concern rules-based international order, which is very important for smaller states like myself. And the third one was also in regards to, I think they used the term Global South. I'm not always so comfortable using that, because I feel that we are putting together countries that stands on their own merits. But I give this to that question in Europe right now, we've been very centered on the war in Ukraine for good reasons. This is very close to our heart. This is very close to our security. But I think it's very important also we engage into sub-Saharan Africa, because when I see when we withdraw, we don't engage, we're not present, other actors will come and fill that vacuum as well. So we need also to be engaged into other areas. If nothing else, also for the cause of Ukraine, but also for the merits it holds in itself. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Minister Chan, you had a few points that were put to you. There was the question on the agreements with France. What are you hoping for? What are you expecting there? There was, you also got a version of the space question. What potential you see for Asian cooperation to develop alternative systems, if that is of interest. There was the self-determination and Taiwan point that was put to you, and again a Myanmar-related point. So if I can invite you to address those points and offer any concluding thought you might want to share.
Thank you, Sebastian. Maybe I deal with them in the reverse order that you have asked. Since you say that we were supposed to finish all this in 3 minutes, then I'll try my best. First, we are an international business hub. Our biggest interest is to uphold a set of rules that people can work with us on, people can trust us, and people can respect us. So if you have any evidence where any companies operating in Singapore might be in violation of that, let us know, and we will follow up robustly. Second, mention about the issue of self-determination. I think that's a basic principle that we all want to adhere to. When it comes to the issue of China and Taiwan, I would suggest that we consider a few points. First, it's important for us to understand the history of how this issue come about. And it scares me to hear perhaps simplistic attempts at simplistic explanations that this is a conflict between democracy and autocracy, or trying to draw unhelpful parallels between Taiwan and Ukraine. I think it's important for us to really understand the reasons behind how we got here. So that's the first thing I would say. Second, I think how this issue is going to be resolved, if not managed, will have to be determined by the Chinese people. It will have to be so. Third, I would say that whether is it the Chinese people on the PRC side or the people on the other side of the straits on the Taiwan side, I think if you ask the common folks, they all share some similar end goals. First, I don't think the people on either side of the Taiwan Straits desire war and conflict. Second, just like anybody around the world, the people on both sides of the Taiwan Straits, they want to have the opportunity to continue to improve their lives. They want to have a sense of security, including economic security. And we hope that both sides across the Taiwan Straits, both at the people level and at the political level, will be able to open up the channels of communications to discuss where their shared future lies and where their shared interest lies. And I think this is something that is important for both sides to do. On the issue of the reform of the global system, be it the global trade order or the global security order, I would just say the following. And having been the trade minister before, I will say this. If we want to abide by a set of rules, then we must respect the outcomes from this. It cannot be that if this set of rules disadvantaged me or did not give me the result that I wish in one particular scenario, I would therefore throw throw the baby out with the bathwater. When we say that we abide by a set of rules, it doesn't mean that that set of rules will always give us the outcome that we desire. That will never happen. But we must have a shared understanding that it is to our benefit to make sure that even at times when the rules did not give us the favorable outcome that we desire, we must continue to abide by this. The second thing that I must say, and I agree with many participants that I've spoken to, is that there are new challenges and we must evolve new rules to manage those new challenges. So take the WTO as an example, the World Trade Organizations. We have challenges to make sure that the current or the previous dispute settlement mechanism continue to work even as we search for a new set of rules for various issues. But yet at the same time, we must have the interest to develop new rules for the new kinds of trade relations that are emerging, whether it's on the digital front or elsewhere. So we cannot be caught just trying to settle the quarrels of yesterday, so to speak, without an eye of the challenges that might emerge tomorrow. We need to do both together. But most importantly, we must remember that a set of rules is there so that we can all, just like having traffic rules, have a safer environment. It's not whether that set of rules favor me or not in one or another particular situation. Last but not least, on the issue of cooperating with France and space, can I just put it in a broader context? I think one of the wonderful things from this conference is that today, from Singapore's perspective, we no longer confine our security partners or partners for cooperation from just a geographical lens. Many of the challenges that we face today and tomorrow are cross-border challenges that transcend the local geography. We take the example of Singapore and Sweden. What can we work together? In the past, we worked together on building up our submarine capabilities. That was perhaps conventional capabilities. Today, there are new areas that we have just discussed that we can work together. For example, the issue of supply chain resilience. How does Sweden strengthen its supply chain? There are lessons from Sweden's experience that Singapore can take. And there are areas that we can work together. The area of countering misinformation or disinformation. Sweden has its challenges, but the modus operandi, the tactics, techniques, and procedures in military jargon that Sweden uses to keep its society together, to inoculate its society against such information operations are lessons that we can learn and we can partner. How to keep our critical infrastructures safe and secure is another area that we can learn from one another, be it France or Sweden. It's like what I mentioned in my speech. We can't defend a network by looking at a point. To defend a network, we need to work together to defend the entire network. There's no point trying to defend the integrity and security of a submarine cable by looking at a point. We need both ends to be secure, and we need everything in between to be secure. And perhaps that's the power of these new technologies, the power of this new concept that we have. While the challenges are more interwoven, the solutions also require to be much more interwoven. And that creates opportunities for countries like Singapore to work with many other partners that may not even be in our local, regional context. And I think there are a lot of things that in these areas that I've just highlighted that we can work with one another. So France and Sweden are just two examples, and we are constantly looking to partner anyone else who have shared interests to work on the issues that we are similarly confronting. And I think my final takeaway from this conference is that the power of the network is so important. Because today, the challenges that we face are not isolated, geographically isolated challenges. The challenges that we face today are interwoven. And to solve those issues, to manage those issues better, we need to build the solutions at the network level. And all of us can contribute to that, be it big or small countries. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, ministers, for this discussion. We are now concluding the 22nd IISS Shangri-La Dialogue, and the first thing I would like to do in doing so is to thank the wonderful IISS staff here at the IISS Asia office and the executive director of that office, Vele Nouwens. The team has done a fantastic job, and of course it has been reinforced by colleagues from IISS offices in London, Berlin, in Manama, and in Washington, who have all deployed to Singapore to make sure that we can convene here in a setting that includes wide international participation. We had some 560 delegates, some 2,800 badges printed to get everything going here. We had some 54 government delegations plus 7 international organizations represented here, 28 full ministers and 3 heads of state. We also had, as you, I think, noticed by their very good questions, 40 young leaders here in the group who were representing among themselves 19 different countries. In terms of media and social media coverage, we had about some 350 members of the press here at the Shangri-La Hotel involved in generating coverage. On social media, as of this morning, we have already reached over 52 million people with content from the dialogue. It's of course also my great pleasure and honor to thank the staff of the Prime Minister's Office, the Ministry of Defense of Singapore, the Minister himself, of course, the Permanent Secretary, and all of his senior officials who were involved in making sure that we can convene here. And of course also the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, the police, and the many security officials who were involved and have kept us safe. Detailed planning for the 23rd IISS Shangri-La Dialogue will begin this afternoon. And I'm looking forward to reconvening here over the same weekend in 2026. So the dates will be the 29th to the 31st of May 2026. The IISS over the coming month will continue its international engagements in the pursuit of regional security, defense cooperation, and dialogue between governments, industry, and the analytical community. We will convene the second IISS Prague Defense Summit in the Czech Republic from the 3rd to the 5th of September. We will embark on a new venture in Germany, convening for the first time a Global Security and Innovation Summit in Hamburg, the 22nd and 23rd of October. And we will, of course, meet in the Kingdom of Bahrain from October 31st to November 2 for the 21st IISS Manama Dialogue. So we have a busy schedule, and I'm looking forward to seeing some of you around these events, and then many of you here at the next IISS Shangri-La Dialogue in 2026. And with that, I shall close, and I invite you now to have a lunch, and then I'm wishing everybody a safe journey home. Thank you so much for your engagement. It has been a real pleasure, and let me invite you to congratulate yourselves, but also give our speakers a final round of applause. Thank you.